Good morning, church. God is good. Amen. Man, it's good to think of that God has been good to us so we can be good to others. We are in our series, Upside Down, Living the Kingdom Way. We're talking about the teachings of Jesus because it should be at the core of every Jesus follower's life, every disciple's life, every Christian's life. At the core of your life should be the teachings of Jesus. Looking at the teachings of Jesus and trying to follow what he says. So we come to this section in Matthew chapter 7 where he's dealing with some of the practical application. But prior to this, what you'll remember and what you'll notice about the Sermon on the Mount is it's very calculated. It's very pointed. It's very looking to people and relationships in relationship to God. And so what we deal with when we are looking at this practical application are some things that are very troubling. Matthew chapter 7, 1 through 6. How do we judge other people? And how do the people we surround ourselves judge us? 7 through 12. How do we treat people? Who do we ask for things? And then how do these things shape us? But our problem as human beings is not that we're, well, maybe a little bit, but it's not that we're not smart or not intelligent. It's just that sometimes we're influenced by people that are like us more than we're influenced by the God who created us. And so where we find ourselves is wanting to be liked. I mean, nobody likes to be unliked. Nobody likes to sit in a room and think they're the most disliked person in the entire room. I mean, you wouldn't want to be a part of that community, would you? Nobody likes to be unliked. And so what happens is, and this is more popular with, this is more in the realm of teenagers than it is adults, and maybe some adults, but sometimes to be liked, we do things unlike us to receive acceptance. Right? Sometimes we fall into this trap of wanting to be liked, of wanting to be accepted, of wanting to be, a part of the group. And so in an effort to be a part of that, to receive acceptance from your fellow man, what you do is you do things that are out of character. You do things that are out of line. But the real problem with this comes in the form of a question. Because when we find ourselves in the place of trying to be liked, we have to really ask, especially if we follow Jesus, especially if we claim Jesus as Lord and Master of our life and Savior of humanity, we have to ask, whose approval are we really seeking? Because this is a problem that falls in line with all of us. We sit there and we go, well, in reality, I mean, I want to do, but I'm going to become like, and we start to lose our way. Because we don't ask this very, very important questions. Whose approval am I seeking? And in the Sermon on the Mount, this is what Jesus does. I mean, let me just remind you for a second what he says in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33. But seek first his kingdom, what? And his righteousness. And all these things that you're seeking, all these things that you're looking for. I mean, go back to chapter 6 and verse 1 where he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before men that you may be seen by them, right? That you may be noticed by men. And then you go back even further than that, and he hones in on this group of religious teachers that's prominent in the area and in the surrounding regions, the Pharisees. And he says, but unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, because they touted that they were these really religious, really right people with God, but what they were doing it for, and what Jesus says they were doing it for, was to be seen by men. And so how as a normal individual, when you find yourself in this place, it's like, I can't live up to that. How am I going to live up to that? I can't practice that. I can't be like that. And you look at these people who are doing all the right things, and you fall into this religious anxiety of how can I live up to, how can I live like, how can I be like? I mean, if these are the most righteous people in the world, I'm certainly not worthy to stand in the presence of God if that's the image I'm trying to make myself after. Certainly I can't be that way. And Jesus simplifies this whole process. And it says it comes down to not what you're seen doing by men, but how God sees you in the inner room. how God sees you in secret, how God sees you in private, what is your, and in reality, this is what it is. What is your relationship with God like? I mean, that's the question we really have to, the whole Sermon on the Mount is doing this. It's causing us to reflect internally so we can change externally, right? We don't change from the outside in. We change from the inside out. We change inwardly before we change externally. A change has to take place in our minds so that we can change our actions, so we can change our course of life. And this is what Jesus is saying. He's like, you don't need to seek all those other things. You need to seek His kingdom and His righteousness. You need to find that. And then in 7 through 12, 7, 11, 7, 10, ask and it will be given unto you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Remember that you're not looking to these men who are not righteous in the eyes of God. You're looking to God Himself to find what it is and where it is I need to live as a follower of Jesus. What am I seeking? Whose approval am I really seeking? And this is why our bottom line this morning is so important. We get to chapter 7, 13 through 20. He starts talking about the leadership of these religious teachers. This is so vitally important. We have to remember this thing because a lot of times when we find ourselves trying to be liked or find acceptance or find our place in something, we do things out of character and we don't realize this very fundamental truth, and that is who you let lead you will determine your destination. Who you let lead your life, who you let influence you, who you submit to, who you trust in. I mean, who you let lead your life will determine your destination. And this is the point where, as we're going through this, you really have to sit back and go, who's leading me? Am I leading me? Or is God leading me? And what will happen? What will happen if I allow myself to lead myself? Where do you think I'll end up? But if I allow Jesus to lead my life, to be the guardrails of my morality and my ethics and my integrity and my influence and my intention, if I allow that to be the center of my life, and I allow Him to push me in the directions, to be led by His Spirit, then what results do we get from that? Who you let lead you will determine your destination. That's a scary thing to think about. So here he goes in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 13 through 20. It's a verse we're all very familiar with. He says, enter through the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter through it. What he's telling them is there's a way that the world goes. There's a way that people naturally are inclined to go. And there's a way that I'm telling you to live that is contrary to that lifestyle. Go back to chapter 5. What does he say in 5:21? If you're angry, if you're at the altar offering your worship and you realize your brother has something you give, drop your offering and go and reconcile with your brother, because God is concerned with your personal relationships with other people, with your brother and with your brothers, as He is with your relationship with Him. And this is why he's saying that the way that I'm telling you to live is contrary to the way the world would have you to live. But if you follow me, look, if you follow the world, this is the result. It leads to destruction. And there are many who enter through it. And then he says this, for the gate is small, right? This is the narrow gate. And the way is narrow that leads to life. And there are few who find it. Go back up to chapter 7 and verse 7. What are we looking for? What are we searching for? Who are we trying to find? And why are we trying to find it? Who are we allowing to lead our life? He says, contrary to what the world's popular beliefs are, the narrow gate is the way to go. And guess what? It's not easy. I mean, this is I guess a falsehood that sometimes people fall into when they're coming to follow Jesus. They don't really consider how hard it is to be a Jesus follower. They don't really consider how hard it is to be a Christian or a disciple, because it takes self-control. It takes your time. It takes your life. It takes things from you that you don't consider when you make that decision. I mean, I'll tell you this, I had a fair understanding, I guess I would say, of what it was like to be a Christian before I was a Christian. I'd seen people do it. I'd seen people living it. I'd seen people, devoting their time, giving their energies, their efforts. And my longest debate before I committed my life to Christ was whether or not I really wanted to live that way. And sometimes people don't consider that. Sometimes they look at it and go, well, they have this instant gratification monkey that everybody in the world, in our culture, in our society today has. Well, you want something, go get it. Fulfill it now. There's no time. There's no wait period. There's no time where I'm going, oh yeah, I'm going to think about this. No, I need to react instantly on everything, about everything. And then I find myself in a place, impulses. I find myself in a place I didn't intend to be because I acted on a reaction without careful thought through my decision. People don't consider how hard it is to live for Jesus. It's easy to live for yourself, but it's not easy to live for the Lord. That takes restraint. That takes discipline. That is hardship. But in that hardship, there's joy. There's peace. There's understanding. In a world where we don't understand a lot of things and people are constantly guessing about everything you could possibly imagine. But all I have to do when I follow Jesus is trust him. He says, the gate is narrow that leads to life. That's what I want. But if I want that, I have to live a hard life. I have to sacrifice things that the rest of the world doesn't have to sacrifice. Am I willing to sacrifice those things? Who am I going to let lead me so that I can attain the destination I desire? Life with God. That's what I want. And then look at this second warning that he gives about the religious leaders. Here in verse 14, he says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but are inwardly ravenous wolves. I mean, think about this for a moment. They come to you, they look like you, talk like you, they sound like you, they are just like you in every way, shape, or form, but they have a motive that you cannot see. They have a desired outcome for your life that is not the best outcome, that is not the outcome that God desires for your life. They have an intention that is evil. They have an intention that is unseen, that's going to lead you. So this is why you have to be careful about who you let lead your life. This is why we really have to look internally and go, who's leading me? Is it me? Is it somebody else? Or is it Jesus? Am I sitting down and really internally reflecting upon my own walk with Jesus? And how does that affect my life? Look what he says here. Because the initial question, the initial statement requires a question. What do you mean, beware of false prophets? How do I know who they are? How do I know what to do when I encounter them? How is there any way to tell? I mean, he says it right here. You'll know them by their fruits, by what they produce in their life. What do they produce in their life? Is it good fruit? Is it bad fruit? I mean, are they doing good things for other people? Or are they only doing good things to be seen by other people? Or is their life encapsulated by God's goodness and doing God's thing? You'll know that their fruits. And then this rhetorical question. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles. Are they? Seems pretty logical. I mean, in that day and age, he's saying, well, just take a good look at this. A grapevine produces a grape. A fig tree produces a fig. You can't see a bad tree and get it to produce good fruit. It just doesn't happen. And you have to look at these religious leaders who are trying to control the outcomes of your actions to see if they fit the bill. And you have to ask yourself, who is leading my life? This is vitally important. Look at this. He says, so every good tree bears good fruit. There is no question about it. A good tree, a healthy tree is another way you can look at this. A healthy tree bears healthy fruit, produces healthy fruit. Something you can consume, something you can eat, something that builds you up, something that nourishes your body. And then he says, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. And he says, you know what they do with bad fruit, right? Look at this. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit. Seems logical. Nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. I mean, this is really simple math. And when you ask yourself, when you sit there and you look at, okay, well, who am I allowing to influence my life? It's an important question because there are a lot of voices. There are a lot of talking heads on the internet, YouTube, news channels. And you can be persuaded one way or another depending on what you consume. One of my instructors at school, we were in a leadership class. At the time they had this place where we could go to learn how to be leaders and what we needed to know as leaders to properly lead the congregations we were going to go and work with. And one of the things I distinctly remember him saying was junk in, junk out. You ever heard that statement before? You put junk in, you get junk out. You put bad food in your body, you get bad results. You intoxicate your mind with nonsense. What do you think is going to come out? What do you think you're going to be focused on? What do you think is going to be really important in your life, even though it has no bearing, no effect on eternity? And I remembered that all through my life. It's like, well, I got to be careful what I watch, not because it's necessarily bad, but what am I consuming that's causing me to change my perspective? What am I reading that's causing me to change my perspective or to hold a view or to hold a position or to have a position? He says you gotta, when you're reading a book, you can't just take everything you read as gospel. You gotta chew the meat, spit out the bones. You have to consume the things that are consumable, spit out the rest. Junk in, junk out. You put junk in, you get junk out. And so the focus of your life becomes what? The focus of your life becomes what's important to you rather than what's most important for you. So he says, a good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. He said, you don't leave a bad tree up to continue to produce bad fruit. I think this is all self-explanatory. But what I'm looking at here, what Jesus is saying is he's illustrating and he's highlighting the flaws of the society of the religious leaders. You see, you had Pharisees who had total and complete control over the mass populace of Jewish people. And they were setting the standards for Jewish life and controlling Jewish actions and Jesus comes in and he wipes that clean and he says, you're looking for God, you're looking for something more, you're looking to live for God, not just for people. Then you come and follow me. Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest for your souls. I can give that to you. But if you follow man, you'll never have rest. In both senses of the word. In the sense that you'll never have rest from trying to continue to live a life of perfection, mistake-free. And you'll never have rest if you follow these men because you won't live in the presence of God. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's a promise. So you follow me, I'm a good tree. I don't bear bad fruit. You follow me, you live like me, you become like me. Guess what you're going to produce in your life? So look at this. So then you will know them by their fruits. You will know them by what they produce in their life. So here's the takeaway. Here's what we need to remember, and I think you all know this because you're so smart. be careful who you follow. Okay? Be careful who you follow. And what I mean, here's what I mean when I say follow, right? When I talk about the word follow, when I talk about the word following, because this is a bigger word than just like we would say, there's different levels of following. There's following like you follow somebody on Instagram or Facebook, right? There's following like you're walking behind somebody. There's following like you're trying to reproduce someone's behavior. Right? There's following in different aspects of life. And we have to be careful the way our mind sees how we're following. So following is simply this. It's who you believe in. It's who you trust in. It's who you listen to. And it's who you submit to. Because you look at our world today. You think about, you guys know this, I don't have to go into detail, but you know how broad the cult world is, right? You know how many cults there's been in the history of let's just think about the last 200 years of cults and how easily persuaded people's minds are and who they believe in and what they trust in and what they listen to. It's manipulation. And human beings, we have a tendency to be drawn to something we like so that we can be liked, or we can be accepted, or we can be received in a manner. But what do we really value? What do we really value in this life? What's the most important thing in your life? Think silently, okay? What's the most important thing? Who do you believe in? Who do you trust in? Who do you listen to? Who do you submit to? Really, in reality, this is what we're asking. Jesus is asking for penetrating self-reflection, not just surface self-reflection, but what am I doing wrong and what can I do better? Who is really leading me? And where do I want to end when my life comes to an end? What do I want to be when my Lord returns? Who do I really trust in? Who do I follow? We got to be careful that we're not following ourselves, that we're not following men or what they've set up, but that we're following Jesus. That we're looking at Jesus and saying, I want to live like that. I want to live like him. I want to become his apprentice. I want to model and shape my life after who he is. Because here it is again. Who you let lead your life will determine your destination. It's important for us to recognize that and remember that and be conscious of it and be conscious internally so we can change externally. So we can do the things that are in line with God's will instead of our own will. There's a difference between seeking the will of God and seeking what I want from the will of God. There's a difference between me going to the scriptures to say, what does God want for my life? And me going to the scriptures to confirm what I already believe. The difference is simply me deciding what it is I'm going there for. And what is determined by those two is who is leading your life. We're going to pick up right there next week. If you have a need of any kind, if you need to confess sins in your life, if you need to take the next step in your faith journey and become a disciple of Jesus by being baptized into his body, we can do that this morning if you'll come forward as we stand and sing.
Who will follow